Coming up next, a master of 80s synth and an extraordinary producer in his own right tells us the story of a quintessential bottle lightning hit that epitomized the decade. Using a wacky TV scientist, his love for Asian women, and an affinity for the films of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton to cultivate this 80s synth pop classic that is forever tattooed on our brain. This musical icon shares the secrets of the song in the unforgettable music video in an exclusive interview coming up next. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember the days when music came out of a Walkman instead of a cloud, subscribe below right now. Promise you'll dig this community. We have the story straight from the legends. There's going to be some kind of a song or a story that you'll dig here. Also, you can check us out on Patreon. There you'll find an additional catalog of exclusive content. You can even become an honorary producer on our channel every day and help us curate this music history. So it's time for another episode of our series, Bottle Lightning. This is a very interesting story of Bottle Lightning from a true pioneer of the synthesizer. Before Thomas Dolby helped kill the radio star with his 1983 top smash, She Blinded Me with Science, he was a poor street musician busking in Paris. Legendary producer Mutt Lange and Foreigner founder Mick Jones needed a great synth sound for the Foreigner 4 album. They heard about Dolby's talent and they brought him in to enrich the classic rock hits Waiting for a Girl Like You, and Urgent, and he did an incredible job. From there, Thomas Dolby was a wanted man. He'd also work on Def Leppard's Pyromania, and he later produced Prefab Sprout's classic record, Steve McQueen. Love breaks down. But he crafted a modern masterwork of synth pop called the Golden Age of Wireless. Before that, with the hit song She Blinded Me with Science. Coming up next, Thomas Dolby tells us how he got his name and how he created an all-time 80s classic. As we go into this interview, I do want to recognize our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses that I always wear. Right now at Zenni.com, you can get a complete pair of prescription glasses for just $6.95. Again, you could get 3 or 4 pairs of glasses for less than a vinyl record. You design them, you personalize them, and you put in your prescription and your address, and they deliver them right to your door. Check it out today at Zenni.com. Here's Thomas Dolby.
I was the first kid in school to have a portable cassette machine. It was this big clunky Philips thing that you would wear with a shoulder strap and these massive headphones. And it ran on batteries, and it had a Dolby button.
Dolby noise reduction has helped make the sound more real.
And nobody really knew what it did, but they nicknamed me Dolby. And my last name is Robertson, so I was Tom Robertson. And after I left school, I moved to London. The punk scene was going on. There was the Tom Robinson Band. They're very popular in West London where I lived, and I liked the band. I used to go see them. And one day I went backstage and I met Tom Robinson, and I told him, well, we have very similar names. I think, whoever makes it first, the other one should change his name. And we shook on it. And about 2 months later, he was in the charts with a song called 2468 Motorway. 2468, and I thought, well, okay, I guess he made it before I did, so I better change my name. So the natural thing to go with was Dolby, which is what my friends called me anyway.
She Blinded Me with Science. Tell me about that song, about writing it. What was the inspiration for it?
I think the title, I think just having a title that's a catchphrase. I had no idea where it came from, this idea of Blinded by Science. It'd be interesting to do the etymology of it sometime. But no, I mean, the title popped into my head, and I guess the genesis of it was that I was struggling slightly with the idea that, I sort of created this geek persona, which is, I say created, I mean, it's an It's a factor of my personality, but it's not totally who I am. But I mean, I think the thing is, so I was trying to make it as a solo artist at a time when solo artists included people like Adamant, or Sting, the sort of pin-ups of the day, Simon Le Bon or whatever. We're all sort of very photogenic, slightly androgynous in some cases, because, women wanted to sleep with them and men wanted to be them, kind of thing.
Right.
And I just didn't feel that I could compete, as like a poster child in that way. And so I sort of went the other way, and I thought, well, maybe this geek side of my persona is something that would be appealing to people. I mean, especially given that, what I do with technology and so on, it seemed to make sense. My dad was an Oxford professor. All of my family are teachers, academics. It just, it was very natural thing for me to do. But I worried slightly that I would be viewed as a sort of that would be viewed as a novelty thing, as a sort of dress up. Because especially in the UK, I mean, the press in the UK, New Musical Express, etc., they were desperate to view English musicians as like a sort of homegrown, naturally like an indigenous music, Because I mean, actually, in my opinion, what the Brits are great at is going out in the world, and this goes back to the Empire days. We go out in the world and we plunder, the treasures from other cultures, bring them back, put a bit of spin on them, and call them our own. So with blues music for the Stones and Led Zeppelin, people like that. But did you hear about the Midnight Railroad? Through the ages to reggae music with the Police. And through to house music, techno, etc. We've always done this extremely well, and the press in the UK, they don't like to really admit that. They like to believe that somebody like Morrissey, he grew up in the projects of a Manchester slum, and when he's still in his pajamas before his tea's even brewed, he's jotted off a couple of lyrics, and they really want to imbue their own with the same sort of indigenous authenticity that somebody that grew up in the Louisiana swamps has, or that was their sense. They didn't really like the idea that this guy was putting on a bit of pantomime, and they viewed it as that. They viewed that as a artificial persona that was enhanced by MTV videos and so on. And so I was always struggling a little bit with that. And I wrote this song, She Blinded Me with Science, and I thought, well, is it too over the top to actually have a song that literally mentions science in the title? But it occurred to me that actually if I had a bona fide scientist in it, then you can't argue with the authenticity. And it might actually make me look quite cool by comparison, So I found this guy, Magnus Pyke, Dr. Magnus Pyke, who's like a TV scientist for the BBC. And it turned out that you can hire him by the day or by the hour. So I got him in to do his famous vocal overdub. Blinded me with science. On condition that he would do the video with me as well. And, the rest is history.
Well, it's a song. It's got such a great groove. It's got so many hooks. That's the thing about that song that lasts. When you hear it, it's in your head.
It's a string of hooks over a great groove. That's basically what the song is.
And the guitar and the synth parts. What do you remember about recording and arranging it as you're putting this together?
Well, I mean, I arranged it in, at the time I had a little studio in a Victorian industrial estate in West London that you had to walk through a butcher's warehouse to get to it. I had this little studio in there, and it's just in the very early days of sequencers and drum machines. In other words, machines that would sort of play notes for you. Up to that point, primarily synths have been things where you twiddle some knobs and you play a part, but it's the beginning of computers in music. And so it was possible for me, being as I'm a frustrated multi-instrumentalist, that I never really had the patience to learn all of those instruments like Prince or somebody like that. So I'm actually not very accomplished at any single instrument, but I'm a good programmer. And so I was using these machines to program whole arrangements. So, the groove, I sort of came up with the groove, and then I just sort of layered hooks over the top of it. And so that's how it came together, really. I recorded it in a studio in London where actually Mutt Lange was in the studio upstairs. And I think actually I booked the studio. It's called Mayfair Studios. And I booked it because I knew that it was one of his favorite places to work. And he came down and listened to what I was doing. And Mutt's an amazing singer, actually. And I asked him if he'd go out and do an octave vocal, which is extremely high. I couldn't reach it in a million years. And so Mutt's actually singing backing vocals on the track.
The synthesized voice that you did on it, you'd later do that with Prefab Sprout and Appetite. I love how you do that over the voice or with the voice. What can you do? It's pretty plain. It means it. Was that just kind of experimentation? Where did that come from?
Well, I was interested in experimenting with, what different kinds of things you could do with the human voice using electronics. But there were no off-the-shelf tools to do that with, really, in those days. Nowadays there's a plethora of them, ranging from auto-tune to, vocoders and machines that will harmonize a lead vocal and things like that. But in those days, you had to use your ingenuity to do that stuff. There's a song called Wind Power that has this sort of synthesized vocal riff, a sort of 4-note descending arpeggio in the bridge sections. And there was a little echo box I had called an AMS, and you could store minute samples on that and then play them back with a tiny keypad. And I can remember sort of, hitting this tiny keypad to play them back. I loved coming up with novel ways of doing things that technology was never really intended for, And I like the sort of freaky and inexplicable aspects of technology. There was an echo box that we used to use in those days called a Roland Space Echo. And if you lift it up the top, there's like a long piece of recording tape, like a snake that's very, very slowly going around, and it records a signal in one place and then it plays it back somewhere else. And that's how you get the echo effect. So Andy Summers was like a big exponent of that. The one that I had, occasionally didn't erase something from a different day. So I'd be there in my Victorian trading estate at 3:00 in the morning, and suddenly I'd hear this ghostly voice out of nowhere. And it was the Roland Space Echo that had failed to record a vocal that I was playing around with 2 days earlier. I just love stuff like that. And I love preserving stuff like that, capturing that and putting it on the record, the anomalies of electronic music.
On your approach to the vocal, too, I always like that. There's talking, there's shouting, there's growling. The noise is the hut, 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 the very melodic. And so there's a lot of different flavors to the vocal and also some of, Magnus and things like that. And I think that's what made it so very interesting.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to sound like a singer. It was sort of just me, and I think that's quite important as well, because a lot of the most memorable vocals, I mean, of course there are some fabulous technical vocalists, but there are also vocalists, as we know, who are just so individualistic that you really hear the human being behind them. And conversely, there are some technically near perfect vocalists that you could really care less about.
I like how you put a lot of your own personality into it. And She Blinded Me With Science. I mean, you use Magnus and he interjects science and some of the things there.
Science!
I think there's some great lyrics in there that the poetry in motion, I always love that. That is actually the first time I ever heard that term. Some of the lines delivered by Magnus, like, good heavens, Miss Sakamoto, you're beautiful.
Heavens, Miss Sakamoto, you're beautiful!
I read somewhere that you just put that in there because you wanted to be able to film the video. You were very taken by Asian women, as many people are. I also read that you wanted to create a music video. That was kind of part and parcel to creating the song, as you kind of saw it visually as well.
I'd always wanted to be a filmmaker. You know, I was sort of interested in experimental film as a teenager, and I was sort of frustrated in that. But, you know, MTV was taking off, and I started to see songs becoming hits because they were getting airplay on MTV. You know, my friend Bruce Woolley, who I played keyboards in his band, was a co-writer on Video Killed the Radio Star. And that was what really launched, you know, that record around the world. And so I thought, well, okay, this is an alternative platform from which to spring off, because I wasn't getting much radio play. You know, I didn't have a big live following, and I thought, okay, if I can make a great music video, and this was before I'd written the song, really. You know, so it's like when I wrote the song, I came up with I had the vague concept for the vibe of it in my head, and I had a title. And then I started immediately thinking about the storyboard of the video. And so as I was writing the song, I was sort of subconsciously filling in the blanks and providing content and material that I could shoot in the video.
I know that Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, you kind of wanted to do a silent movie motif in that style. But to see a music video and to get visually, to get a vision from what the artist is saying that goes along with the single, and to have it 24/7, it was mind-blowing, especially for a kid like me growing up in a small town in Idaho, away from everything. That was the window to the world. And it was just, I can't remember a time that I've experienced anything quite like it, that just opened so many possibilities up. And you were a huge part of that.
In the early days of MTV, when it had shown its power as a distribution platform, there was a generation of artists, Peter Gabriel, Kate Bush, Laurie Anderson.
Well, you don't know me.
You know, Talking Heads. Who really sort of embraced the medium as a new form of expression. And it was a very special time, you know, and it's a time when music fans were heavily influenced by that as a new experience. And they were choosing to stay in and watch it on a Saturday night instead of going out to a gig or a club, you know. And it was a limited window of time, you know, within a decade or so, it was basically all over.
Yeah, it's interesting how it blew up and then it was gone, and now it's on YouTube. I mean, I think that, man, I don't think people realize how many views these old music videos are getting. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 million a year of people rediscovering these songs, or just young people finding them and saying, man, this is really cool. The song lives on, She Blinded Me With Science, because it gets sampled quite a few times. I know that Mobb Deep sampled it.
Yeah. Catch me in the club with something for them haters on the wrong when I'm bumping.
There was some controversy when Britney Spears' then husband, Kevin Federline, sampled it without permission. I remember reading your blog. This is back in the MySpace. Talk about another thing that kind of came and went really quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I was not too happy about K-Fed doing it, and I got my lawyer to write a cease and desist letter, and then I thought, well, how do I find K-Fed to hand him this letter? Maybe get a map of the stars' homes in Hollywood and go find Britney.
Because he sampled the Mobb Deep, but which had your sample in it, so probably didn't get permission for either. Also, it was used in the first episode of Big Bang Theory. That it was used to pitch the show.
Yeah, it was the original theme tune in that. It was used a couple of times in Breaking Bad.
Hello?
Hey.
And it didn't end up being the theme to the Big Bang Theory, which is a bit of a shame. That's sort of one of those quotable things, it's like a pub quiz question.
Been used Addams Family 2, South Park.
Hey, Clark. Clark, you there?
This is Clark. Go ahead.
NCIS, The Simpsons.
Emmy nominee Jennifer Garner.
I mean, The Simpsons, they only go for the big pop culture moments. King of the Hill, another one.
Me with science. She blinded me with science.
And Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion.
Michelle. Oh, Michelle. Over here.
It's just one of those quintessential songs of the 80s. You can throw out Sledgehammer and Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Don't You Forget About Me. And She Blinded Me with Science. These are just the songs that are the epitome of what the 80s were all about.
Hopefully those are not a Rickroll.
No, he is.
Yeah, exactly.
You're playing with fire really with that stuff because it can definitely come back to bite you. But happily for me, I've sort of stayed just on the right side of being reduced to a Trivial Pursuit question. Hopefully because people, were also aware of the deeper cuts. I knew that I was a serious artist who just had a moment of insanity.
Hey, leave us a comment about Thomas Dolby and this classic gem from 1983. Again, one of the quintessential songs of the 80s. What are your memories of the song and his music? Let's have a great discussion about his work on all of these great records. If you like our content, be sure to subscribe below so that you can continue to get these interviews. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth.